And welcome back to the Interfaith Roundtable. I'm Cantor Mark Perman of the Farmington Valley Jewish Congregation, Emek Shalom in Simsbury. My guest for this program, Deacon Arthur Miller, is an author, radio host, revivalist, and retired businessman. Deacon Miller is the director of the Office for Black Catholic Ministries for the Archdiocese of Hartford. He is also the Catholic chaplain at Hartford's Capital Community College and the president of the National Association of Black Catholic Administrators. Deacon Miller speaks very powerfully to social justice issues across the globe, and we'll be talking about some of those in a moment. So I'd like to welcome Deacon Miller to the show.
Well, thank you, Mark. It sounds like I do a lot of things, doesn't it?
Sounds like you're pretty busy.
Yes, certainly my calendar is packed. But when I look at all that I do and all that God has given me the grace to do, I'm certainly a blessed man. And being here, I assure you, I feel just as blessed.
Well,
so thank you for having me.
We're blessed to have you. So tell everyone what called you to ministry and what exactly a deacon is. I'm personally not familiar with it. I've heard of it, but I don't know the specifics.
Well, the call to ministry, I believe that we're all called, every single one of us, in some way or another to accomplish what God has in store for us in our lives. Some listen, some don't. Some hear it early, some hear it late. Some ignore it. I would suggest that I had heard God calling to me very early. I was a friend of a young man who was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. His name was Emmett Till. And it was during that time that my mother and his mother were friends. And she spoke of how this country is and some of the things that we must do in order not only to lift ourselves up, but to relegate all those things we can't understand in prayer. And by doing that, maybe we can right the boat that has been sunk or at least listing. And so I would suggest through, like many people, through some tragedies, we're called closer and closer to God, for where else can we go? So it was from a very early age that I felt the calling to serve my fellow human being and God as well, by serving my fellow human being.
And prior to that, you were more secular, you were more agnostic, and then suddenly sort of like the spiritual light went off. Can you describe that?
I was 10 years old. So
I was 10 years old.
So
okay,
I was
you came to it early.
I was a little boy, but
right.
I think all of us, growing up in a Catholic family, we certainly went to Mass every Sunday, and I must suggest that I was forced to go to Mass. They're forced to go to church.
Right.
It was one of those, we drag our children some places. Well, I was dragged to church. And within that, I've discovered that what we generally worship is the God of our mother's understanding. And my mother had great faith in God, and all of us as growing up, we attended Mass every Sunday and began to sink in. And eventually, we moved to another community. And in that community, we were one of the first black families in Chicago to move into a segregated area. And I was beset by kind of racial injustice and bullying at the time. So I drew even closer to church at that time. So I think it has always been forming in me. But I've always lived in a society that kind of forced me to look to God for comfort, to look to my family for comfort.
What do you say? There's a book written by a rabbi, Harold Kushner, called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. People who've been good, productive, positive citizens who come down with terminal illnesses, the victims of the horrible Newtown tragedy. Why didn't God intervene somehow to cause the gun to misfire or to cause something to stop that? Is God involved in the world, do you feel, or absent, or waiting for us to take the lead?
And of course, as a clergyman, I'm often asked that, where's God in these moments of terror, these moments of incredible violence, these moments where we feel despair? Well, I would suggest to you that God is always present, but God is present through us. God is not a grand puppeteer that causes us to move here and there. God is one who instills within us faith and wholeness in a broken world. We live in a world that is absolutely broken. And in that broken world, we make our way. We are these pilgrims. So God has sent us. And from those horrible tragedies, like Newtown, and like many of the circumstances that I find myself in, as the director of the Office for Black Catholic Ministries, frequently I'm in areas that have extreme poverty. And one of the twin demons of poverty is violence. And so I walk the streets of the north end of Hartford, and I've seen extraordinary violence similar to that happened in Newtown. And what I've discovered is that God sends people there to draw from these horrible circumstances somehow a glimpse of good. Now the circumstances that caused it aren't good, but what we draw from that can be good. The horrible tragedy of Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy that was slaughtered by barbarians, quite frankly, horrible human beings, the Ku Klux Klan, who murdered him. From that, the civil rights movement was birthed. From that, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat as a direct result of what happened to Emmett Till. From that came Dr. King, and from that came the greatest movement that helped this country become what it was called to be. So we can pull from things like Newtown a goodness that can only come from faith in human beings.
So maybe sometimes there are necessary evils that are catalysts for change?
I don't know if any evil is necessary, but I would say necessary good can come from indiscriminate evil.
Now, when one thinks of articulate, charismatic, powerful black preachers, one thinks of the Protestant tradition.
Certainly.
So I had to remind myself when you spoke so brilliantly and articulately at the Martin Luther King commemorative ceremony in Simsbury that you were in fact a Catholic representative. Because is that unique among Catholics to have someone of your ability to do that? And are the priests jealous?
Well, no, the priests aren't jealous. Let me say that publicly. I would say that I am proudly black and authentically Catholic. My faith tradition is not one that neither encourages nor denies my actual racial heritage. My racial heritage is one that allows me the gift to be able to proclaim God the way that God has given me the gift to do. So I remain very, very much an African American. But I am also, to the depths of my soul, Catholic. And one does not deny the other. I would suggest, in fact, that they help one another. They encourage one another.
And have you thought about, well, tell a little bit more about the work of a deacon within the church. What is your involvement in the church? What is your involvement in ministry? Aside from these public things that you do, what's more centered around the church and the community? As
an ordained deacon in the Catholic Church, I am a clergyman. There are several levels of clergy in the Catholic Church. There are deacons, priests, and bishops. I am a deacon.
Cardinal?
Well, cardinal and a bishop are the same.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
But as a deacon, I am ordained to do several things within the church, such as baptisms, preaching, weddings. I visit the sick. I can give what's called viaticum, which is the last...
last rites?
Well, it's not the last rites. It's the last sample of the body and blood of Christ, which we call the Eucharist, to those who are dying. I visit the sick, clothe the hungry. In Acts 6 of the New Testament Scripture, it indicates that the apostles ordained several men who would go out to help feed the hungry. And in fact, it's a call to social justice. So deacons actually are called to help the community in those issues of social justice. And social justice is very much has been a part of my life. So it just absolutely fit perfectly.
Yeah, talk a bit about that, because sometimes people think of religious people as being, centered on God and meditation and theology, sort of sitting in the ivory tower, but not realizing that Judaism and Christianity and even Islam speak to action, putting your religious values to action in terms of healing the world, which we call in Hebrew, tikkun olam.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about
well,
that.
Well, Dr. King, in his paper, Pilgrimage to Nonviolence, spoke to that very issue. And he had dealt with a philosopher by the name of Rossenbusch. And he gained from that this understanding that any religion that ministers only to the body but not the soul, that feeds the body, and the body feeds the soul, is a moribund church waiting to die. Christ called for social justice in his ministry. Every leader within the Jewish tradition, the Muslim tradition, and certainly the Christian tradition, has called us to love one another. In fact, the golden rule, to do unto one,
Right.
to one what you would not want done to
Right.
yourself, is in each of the faith traditions. So we're all called to do that. My call has been one in the civil rights movement simply because it was tied inextricably through Martin Luther King and quite a few Catholic leaders to find justice, because they are inextricably tied. Social justice and injustice and poverty are tied together. So if a religion does not address that, it's not addressing what's befalling the people in that congregation.
I've got a question for you, because
Sure.
in sometimes speaking out on issues in the world, for example, another clergy and I have written some things about Syria and how we've not, been involved in helping civilians over there who've been, bombarded and persecuted and killed by a ruthless leader. And of course, there's the fear of terrorism and all the political overtones. However, the pure humanitarian disaster that's occurring is horrific. Over 700, 800,000 refugees streaming over the border. So do people ever say to you or to say to other clergy, just kind of stick to the prayers, stick to the liturgy, stick to God, but don't get political on us? I mean, if you talk about life and death and stopping murder and preventing suffering, is that political, or is that a mandate as part of being a religious leader?
Poverty is not political.
Right.
Poverty is reality. Murder is not political. Murder is a reality. I have tried to live my life for several philosophies, one of which is that I choose not to be validated by people. My choice is to be validated by the act of righteousness. If I act in a way that is righteous and it offends people, the righteousness is what I must turn to. When I look back on my life, I have to make certain I've always stood on the side of justice, no matter how unpopular it may have been. That's why I went to jail so many years ago, because it was the right thing to do. And I assure you, in the early 60s, most of the community, both in the black community and certainly in the white community, did not want us, young kids, to stand up, to go to jail to do that. But it was what was right. So I looked first at that and not concerned myself about being approved by the community, because the act has to be righteous.
If Martin Luther King could come back, he's been gone since 1968, right, and could see the world as it is today, would he see tremendous growth and opportunity within the African community? Would he be, obviously, as we say in Yiddish, kvelling over the first African-American president? Or would he see some other things, apathy? Would he see young African-Americans perhaps who don't understand the legacy of the civil rights movement and take things for granted? I mean, where would he, you can't speak for him, but what do you think?
And certainly I can't. My thoughts are that he would look at where we are and be extraordinarily proud of how far we've come, but crestfallen at the great chasm that separates the poor from the rich. That's the chasm that has grown so dramatically in our country. And I think he would look at the poor, regardless of their racial makeup, as that area that he has to help lift up. That's the chasm that helps to separate us today. Certainly, African Americans and Hispanic and other ethnicities and racial groups have done extraordinarily better than we did before. But is that the real barometer that we must use? The barometer is not how far we've come, but how far we have yet to go.
I find myself, thinking, why is it that sometimes, we Jews should help our own, African Americans, focus on your own. My personal conviction is that we human beings have responsibility to all human beings, whether someone is black, Chinese, Vietnamese, Syrian. We're all God's children. If there's one, a rabbi who I admired, Marshall Meyer, used to say, if there's one God, we're all brothers and sisters. So why just take care of your own? I should just take care of Jews. We have a responsibility to take care of everybody. You know, how do you?
Well, I agree. Dr. King wrote from the Birmingham jail that when he was asked, why are you here? And he said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
Right.
So injustice in you is injustice in me.
Right.
My concerns are for all my brothers and sisters, because I truly believe that we are all going to get to heaven. And once we are there, this temporary part will end. How will I be able to look at those souls that are there and say, I didn't help? I'm called to help. I'm not called to see the end of the plans that God has given me. My role is to make certain that I do well the plan that He's given me. And where it ends, that's up to God.
When you see violent acts, for example, Newtown, or you see the crime that occurs in communities, you know, the conservative point of view is people exercise personal choice and responsibility. They choose to do evil. They have to be stopped and punished. The more liberal point of view is, well, all these factors intervened and somehow the person was a victim of circumstance. Do you have a general philosophy as far as that goes? Personal responsibility versus external factors?
Well, certainly I don't believe they're divided. We certainly all have personal responsibility, but what underpins that? I believe the violence that we see now is the symptom. It is not, the illness. There's certainly a social illness that has caused such violence. If we take away guns, there's still going to be violent people. But if we take away guns, there won't be as much killing.
Right.
So I land on both sides of that issue. I remember some years ago we had this great discussion at the Archdiocese of Hartford under Archbishop Mansell, where we were working on violence in Hartford, and this was some years ago. And one of the thoughts that was put forth was, well, the state police will be here, so there won't be much violence during the summer. And my response is, yeah, but September's coming, and the issues that underlie the violence will remain there. So we have to do something to address these issues, but not only health, rather mental health, but all of those other aspects of it that have caused such a violent world, this whole culture of violence. And I belong to a group, an interreligious group, that is now addressing this culture of violence. We're trying to act to find out what we can do on an interreligious, interculture, any interdenomination way of addressing the ills of the people.
It's probably a hard question for any religious-oriented person, but why have the faith traditions been unsuccessful in reaching young people to try to counsel them towards a life that's more centered around God, that's more centered, less on materialism, less on, quick highs and quick lows? And, is it parents who fail to, I've noticed that growing up, wherever I see a church, and I see whether it's black group, Indian, Vietnamese, Jews, that generally when the religion is present, people uphold the law more, society is more structured, everything's healthier. Where there's less religion, less structure, less faith, more materialism, chaos reigns. So why haven't we been able to really get out there and influence with some exceptions, but overall, is it the failure of the ministers?
It's certainly a trend. It's a societal trend. I live in what I refer to as a microwave society, where that we want immediate gratification. You can go through college and just do it on your computer. You don't even have to go.
Right.
I think we have lifted up materialism, in my view. That all the things that we look for are self-gratification. Our society, in my view, has gone much more towards self-gratification. There was a movie that was out once that was Get Rich or Die Trying. Well, if that's where our society is looking, young people, it seems to me, but not only young people, I'm wasting my time when my objective is not the afterlife. My objective is this life. And unless we're able to change a societal direction, this paradigm change, I think it will persist. The other aspect is, for many churches, it's not relevant to young people. When we were coming up, what drew us to church was that in many black churches, it was our CNN. It was where we got the news,
really?
where we understood was going on in our communities.
Because you weren't getting the full story on radio or TV
Absolutely.
or anywhere. Yeah, right.
And now, in order to get the full story, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You turn on, I have 1,000 channels on my television.
Right.
You can be entertained through everything. Social media has taken the place of God. You have iPhone, iPad, but never have an eye on Jesus or eye on religion.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's what we have to do, is to recognize and to accept materialism, those things that we can have and hold and are geared towards, has taken the place of what we can look forward to.
In the Jewish world, sometimes we talk about how the more free and liberated Jews became, the more accepted we became in certain communities, the more dissolved the Jewish people became, the more intermarriage, not that that's a bad thing, but the more assimilated, the less people went to synagogue because they didn't feel the need. Somehow being persecuted meant you had to connect and bond. The less you're persecuted, the more quote-unquote free you are, the more you don't need your community.
You don't need God.
Right.
It is amazing to me that after 9/11, churches were filled because they were afraid.
Yes.
They lost their safety and they could only find it in God. After Newtown, churches and synagogues were filled because they were afraid. There was a loss of safety. When we aren't safe, we turn to the only place where we can find safety. It has always amazed me that in poverty, we turn to God, but in prosperity, we turn to ourselves.
It's like we turn to God in crisis. We've all done it. Please God, don't let her die. Please God, save me. I promise if I get better, I'll do blah, 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 blah. And where are you when things are going, God is saying, where are you when everything was going great last year?
And I've never heard anyone say, please God, should I have the Rolls Royce or the Bentley?
Right.
And so it is, what is that old saying? There's no atheist in a foxhole.
Right. Talk a little bit about the work you've done about anti-bullying, and that's a big thing. When I was a kid, I was picked on because I was the creative kid and I was doing theater and stuff, and I was not the athletic kid. So I felt I was picked on, but now there's this bullying concept. And so, is that just normal behavior with kids? I mean, kids are going to get bullied,
Right, I'm 67 years old.
Right.
I was bullied when I was a kid. They took my lunch money. I think bullying has always been around. But I think we're now noticing the ramifications of it. It's right on the tip of everyone's lips or tongue. And so I do a lot of work in terms of bullying. And how do you stop that from bullying? How do you allow or get people, children in particular, to understand that everyone has value? The dehumanization of someone occurs when you start to call them names. But the truth is, Mark, I could call you every name in the book, but it's irrelevant because I didn't give you the value. God gave you the value that you have. And what we do is try to devalue people. My talk generally will be about the value that every single person has. And that value is good and wonderful and gifted to them. And no one should ever be able to determine who you are. And unfortunately, it happens all too often. And so I'm quite busy doing talks on bullying in public schools, colleges. I even had to go to a nursing home once because there was some bullying of some elderly people.
Hey. Happens in families too, probably.
Oh, absolutely.
People get used to dynamics where they're devalued by another person, and they learn to accept that that's who they are based upon how that person treats them. So it was this kid in Newtown, not that you want to say he did a horrible thing, but was he, in a sense, a victim of circumstance because of his Asperger's, because of the mother giving him access to guns, because of, pulling out of special programs, leaving him alone 3 or 4 days? How much when these things occur do you really have to look at the full range? Because like Dennis Prager will say, well, there's just evil in the world, accept it. It's going to happen. There's going to be a Hitler. There's going to be an Ahmadinejad. There are just evil people. Is that a cop-out?
Well, there's certainly a lot of people who have who are under the same circumstances as the young boy who did the horrendous thing in Newtown, but did not do that.
Right.
So we can use an excuse to do whatever we want. I have 4 children. Believe me, when they were growing up, I heard every excuse in the world why they didn't do their homework. So we can find excuses, and we're not looking for excuses. We're trying to find solutions to existent issues. So I would say certainly anyone can use an excuse, but I don't particularly care about the excuse. What we have to do is find solutions so that those kinds of circumstances don't continue. And therein lies the whole idea of looking at the whole societal ill of violence. What is the antidote to that? And how do we implement that as quickly as possible?
For those who would like to hear more of you, or do you have a website, or they can Google you, or where can they hear you speak, or if they want more of you than this half hour?
Well, if they want more of me, and they haven't turned off the channel as yet, my office number is 860-243-0648. And we do have a website at my office. It is aoh-obcm.org.
Thank you. Any final words before we say goodbye? Or
well, you can also listen to me on my radio program.
Tell them about that.
Yes, it comes on Sunday morning at 8:30 on WJMJ Catholic Radio. And it was a
the
blessing.
Frequency. What's the frequency?
Oh, it's 88.9.
And you're on the web too?
It's on the web as well.
Thank you very much. Deacon Arthur Miller of St. Mary's Catholic Church, and an active and vital spokesman for social justice and crusader. And we thank you so much for being with us and hope you'll come back.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you. I want to thank Althea and Clay and Karen and Phyllis and Sally and Jason. Who did I leave out? Anybody else? Did I leave anybody out? No. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the Interfaith Roundtable. We're on every month, and the times and dates are all listed, and you can listen on the web as well, www.simsburytv.org.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.